Have you ever witnessed something so terrifying, so impossible, that it shattered everything you believed to be true? I have. One ordinary evening, while I was standing before hundreds of worshippers inside our town's mosque, the sky itself seemed to answer me. A mysterious sound echoed from above. The earth beneath our feet trembled. A brilliant light appeared over the mosque, and within seconds, grown men were crying, children were screaming, and people who had never known fear dropped to their knees in absolute terror. At that moment, I had no idea that what happened in the sky would lead me on a journey that would cost me my reputation, my friendships, and nearly everything I had built my entire life. But it would also lead me to the greatest truth I had ever discovered. If you believe Jesus still changes lives today, take a moment to subscribe and join this growing family of faith. And stay with me until the very end, because what happened next completely changed everything. And before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Tell us your country and the exact time you're watching in the comments below. Our prayer team reads these comments every day. If you're carrying a burden, facing sickness, fear, family problems, financial struggles, or any impossible situation, don't hesitate to share your prayer request. We believe God still answers prayer, and many believers around the world will stand in faith with you. Now, this is my story. My name is Imran Qureshi, and I was born into a deeply religious Muslim family in a small town in Pakistan. Our community revolved around one place, the mosque. It wasn't just where we prayed. It was where we gathered, settled disagreements, celebrated festivals, and sought guidance for every important decision. From childhood, I was taught that my purpose was to serve God faithfully. I memorized religious teachings at a young age and earned the respect of elders because I could recite long passages with confidence. As I grew older, the chief imam began trusting me to lead prayers whenever he traveled to neighboring villages. People admired me. Children looked up to me. Families sought my advice. Outwardly, I appeared successful. But inside, something was missing. I could never explain it. No matter how much I studied, no matter how faithfully I prayed, there remained an emptiness deep within my heart that nothing seemed able to fill. Still, I ignored it. After all, respected religious leaders weren't supposed to admit they had questions. My wife, Amina, was the greatest blessing God had given me. She possessed a quiet faith, a gentle spirit, and a kindness that touched everyone she met. But 3 years before everything changed, our lives fell apart. She became seriously ill. At first, the sickness seemed small. Simple fatigue. Occasional pain. Then it grew worse. Week after week. Month after month. Her strength slowly disappeared. Doctors examined her repeatedly. We traveled from village to village seeking treatment. Every visit emptied more of our savings. Every new medicine brought fresh hope. Every disappointment broke our hearts all over again. Some treatments helped for a few weeks. Others did nothing at all. Eventually, we stopped counting how much money we had spent. Watching the woman I loved struggle just to walk across our small home became almost unbearable. Many nights I sat beside her bed while she cried herself to sleep. When she finally drifted off from exhaustion, I would quietly ask God one question. Why? But heaven seemed silent. Then came the day that changed everything. It was late afternoon. The chief imam had traveled to another district for a funeral, leaving me responsible for leading the evening gathering. I remember feeling proud. Hundreds of people had already filled the mosque courtyard. Merchants closed their shops. Farmers returned from the fields. Children chased each other between rows of sandals. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the air from nearby bakeries. Everything felt ordinary, peaceful, predictable. I stepped forward confidently. People grew quiet. I began speaking about devotion, obedience, and remaining faithful to our traditions. The crowd listened attentively. Then I made a statement I had repeated many times before. Our town will never abandon the faith of our fathers. The people nodded. Some even raised their voices in agreement. At that moment, I felt completely certain. But only seconds later, everything changed. Without warning, the birds stopped singing. The children fell silent. Even the wind disappeared. An unnatural stillness settled over the entire courtyard. It wasn't normal. Everyone noticed it. I looked around, confused. People exchanged nervous glances. Some stared upward. Others looked toward the horizon as if expecting something terrible to happen. Then, we heard it. At first, it sounded like distant thunder. Low, deep, powerful. Yet the sky above us was perfectly clear. No storm clouds. No rain. Nothing. The sound grew louder. It echoed through the air with a force I had never experienced before. It seemed to come from every direction at once. The ground beneath our feet felt as though it vibrated. Women clutched their children. Men covered their ears. Shopkeepers ran into the streets. Fear spread through the crowd within seconds. My own heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Then someone shouted, "Look!" Every face turned toward the sky. Above the mosque, a brilliant light appeared. Not lightning. Not the sun. Not anything I had ever seen. It hovered above the building, shining with an intensity that seemed impossible to describe. The mysterious sound continued. Some people cried. Others fell to their knees. Several elderly men began trembling uncontrollably. Children screamed. Chaos erupted. I stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to explain what I was witnessing. Then, for reasons I still cannot fully describe, questions I had buried for years suddenly rose inside my heart. Questions about truth. Questions about salvation. Questions about Jesus. Questions I had always dismissed without ever honestly examining them. I tried to push them away, but I couldn't. It felt as though something far greater than fear had entered my soul. I didn't know it then, but that unforgettable moment above our mosque was only the beginning. Because that very night, my wife would reveal a secret she had hidden from me for nearly a month. A secret involving mysterious dreams, a brilliant light, and a man she could never forget. When I heard what she had been seeing while I was asleep, every certainty I had built my life upon began to crumble. That night, I walked home in complete silence. The streets of Darwesh Sharif, usually alive with conversation after evening prayers, felt strangely different. Everywhere I looked, small groups of people stood whispering. Some claimed the mysterious voice above the mosque was a warning from God. Others insisted the brilliant light was only a rare natural phenomenon. A few refused to speak about it at all. Fear had settled over our entire town. But none of them knew what I was about to discover inside my own home. When I opened the wooden door, I found my wife, Amina, sitting quietly beside a small oil lamp. Normally, she would greet me with a smile and ask how the evening gathering had gone. Tonight, she didn't say a word. She simply looked at me, almost as if she had been waiting. I sat beside her and slowly described everything that had happened. The strange silence, the terrifying sound, the brilliant light suspended above the mosque, the panic, the screaming, the confusion. As I spoke, her face slowly lost all color. She wasn't surprised. She looked terrified. I stopped talking. Amina. What is it? She lowered her eyes. For several long moments she remained silent. Then, with trembling hands, she whispered, "There's something I've been hiding from you." At first, I assumed she was talking about her illness. Maybe the doctors had given her bad news. Maybe she had been suffering more than she admitted. But what she said next completely caught me off guard. For nearly a month, I've been having dreams. I stared at her. What kind of dreams? She swallowed hard. The same dream keeps returning. I tried to smile. Amina. Dreams are only dreams. She slowly shook her head. No. These are different. They feel real. So real that I wake up crying. She took a deep breath before continuing. In the first dream, I was standing completely alone in a large, empty field. The sky was covered with dark clouds. I couldn't find anyone. I was afraid. Her voice trembled. Then, a brilliant light appeared in the distance. It began moving toward me. The closer it came, the more peace I felt. I listened quietly. She continued. I couldn't see the person's face clearly. But I knew. I somehow knew. The light was coming from Jesus. A chill ran down my spine. She quickly added, I never told anyone. I was afraid. I thought you would become angry. She was right. Only weeks earlier, I probably would have. She wiped tears from her eyes before telling me about the second dream. This time, I wasn't in a field. I was standing outside our mosque. Everything inside me froze. The streets were empty. There was complete silence. Then, suddenly, a bright light appeared above the mosque. I felt my heart pounding. The same place. I whispered. She nodded. The light stayed above the building. And I heard a voice. What did it say? She closed her eyes. I couldn't understand every word. But I clearly heard. Many hearts will soon begin searching for the truth. I could barely breathe. Those words echoed inside my mind. Searching for the truth. Ever since the mysterious event that afternoon, that was exactly what had begun happening inside me. I wanted to dismiss everything as coincidence. I wanted to explain it away. But then she spoke again. There was one more dream. Her voice became even quieter. In this dream, I saw thousands of people gathered together. They were praying. They were singing. Many were crying. It wasn't our town. It was somewhere else. She paused. Someone spoke to me. What did they say? They told me, you will be healed there. The room became completely silent. I couldn't move. Amina had been suffering for almost 3 years. Doctors had failed. Medicine had failed. Hope itself was disappearing. Yet somehow, her dream promised healing. There is something else. She hesitated again. I've never told anyone this. I looked at her carefully. The people in that gathering. They were followers of Jesus. The words struck me like lightning. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. In our community, even discussing Christianity could bring serious consequences. People viewed Christians with suspicion. Some families completely rejected anyone who showed interest in Jesus. Yet my own wife, the woman I loved, was telling me she believed God had shown her a Christian gathering before it ever happened. I didn't know what to think. For the next several days, our town remained obsessed with the mysterious event above the mosque. Visitors arrived from neighboring villages asking questions. Some claimed they had heard the strange sound from miles away. Others insisted they had also seen the bright light. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. But while everyone debated what had happened, Amina's health became even worse. Some mornings she couldn't even stand without help. Watching her suffer broke me. I prayed harder than ever before. Still, nothing changed. At least, that's what I thought. One afternoon, a traveler stopped in our marketplace. He carried news from another district. A large Christian crusade is taking place next week. People barely listened. But one sentence caught my attention. There have been many testimonies of healing. I immediately dismissed it. Surely these were exaggerated stories. Yet when I looked toward Amina, she wasn't dismissing it. She was quietly crying. Later that evening she whispered, "Imran, I think that's the place from my dream." I felt my stomach tighten. "No, we can't go. If people see us there, our lives will never be the same." She nodded slowly. "I know. But what if?" She stopped speaking. "What if what? What if God is inviting us?" Her question haunted me all night. For 3 nights I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the brilliant light above the mosque. Every time I prayed, I remembered Amina's dreams. Every time I tried convincing myself none of it meant anything, a strange restlessness filled my heart. Then something happened that completely shattered my resistance. Very early one morning, before sunrise, I found Amina kneeling beside our bed. She was praying, quietly, through tears. I had never heard her pray like that before. She wasn't asking for healing. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for relief. She simply whispered, "God, if you are leading us, give my husband the courage to follow the truth." I quietly stepped back before she noticed I was there. Her prayer pierced my heart. That morning, for the first time in my life, I admitted something I had spent years denying. I was afraid. Not afraid of losing my position. Not afraid of what people might say. I was afraid that if I truly followed the truth, my entire life would change forever. And deep inside, I already knew it would. Finally, after days of wrestling with fear, I looked at my wife and quietly said the words that would change our future forever. "We're going." She burst into tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of hope. Neither of us realized that the journey we were about to take would lead to a miracle so extraordinary. It would destroy every doubt I had ever carried, and introduce me to Jesus in a way I never imagined possible. For 3 days, I wrestled with my decision. Every part of me wanted to stay home. Every part of me feared what people would say if they discovered where we were going. I had spent years earning the respect of my community. Families trusted me. Children greeted me with admiration. Religious leaders depended on me whenever the chief imam traveled. If anyone saw me attending a Christian gathering, everything I had built could disappear overnight. But every time I looked at Amina, I saw a woman who had suffered for nearly 3 years. A woman who had exhausted every treatment. A woman whose only remaining hope rested in a dream she could not explain. Finally, before sunrise, we quietly left our home. We told almost no one where we were going. As we walked toward the old bus station, my heart beat so loudly that I wondered if Amina could hear it. Neither of us spoke. We simply prayed silently as the bus carried us farther away from everything familiar. Hours passed as we traveled through dusty roads, dry fields, and small villages. The farther we went, the more nervous I became. Then something unexpected happened. I looked across the crowded bus, and immediately recognized several familiar faces. Men from my own town, respected businessmen, a school teacher, even one elderly man who regularly attended the mosque. They quickly looked away when our eyes met. No one greeted each other. No one admitted why they were traveling. But we all understood. Each of us carried the same secret. Questions, hope, fear. The silence inside that old bus spoke louder than words ever could. By late afternoon, we finally arrived near the crusade grounds. The sight before me left me speechless. Thousands of people had gathered in a massive open field. Families sat beneath temporary shelters. Children laughed freely. Volunteers handed out drinking water. People from different backgrounds greeted one another like family. There was no anger, no arguments, no fear, only joy. It wasn't what I had expected. Not at all. I had imagined confusion. Instead, I found peace. As Amina and I slowly walked through the crowd, she suddenly stopped. She gripped my arm tightly. "Imran." Her voice trembled. "What is it?" I asked. She looked around with tears already filling her eyes. "I've seen this place before." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The tents. The stage. The hills behind the crowd. They're exactly like my dream." A chill ran through my body. Every detail she described matched perfectly. She wasn't guessing. She was recognizing. The dream she had hidden from me for weeks was unfolding right before our eyes. As evening approached, worship began. Thousands of voices rose together. I had never witnessed anything like it. Some people sang with tears streaming down their faces. Others quietly knelt in prayer. Families embraced each other. The atmosphere felt completely different from anything I had ever experienced. For reasons I couldn't explain, peace settled over my heart. Not excitement. Not emotion. Peace. The kind of peace I had spent my entire life searching for. Then something happened that made my entire body freeze. A middle-aged man began walking directly toward us. I had never met him before. He wasn't from our town. He didn't know our names. Yet he stopped right in front of Amina. He smiled gently, then quietly said, "The Lord showed me this morning that a woman who traveled many hours carrying years of pain is sitting here tonight." I felt my heart pounding. He continued, "You have cried many nights. You have wondered if God has forgotten you. But He has not. Jesus sees every tear." Amina immediately began crying. Neither of us had spoken to this man. No one had told him about her illness. Yet he described her life as though he had lived beside us for years. Then he gently added, "Tonight, your suffering will come to an end." Without saying another word, he quietly walked away. I stood there unable to move. Every logical explanation I had held onto was slowly disappearing. Moments later, the speaker invited everyone needing healing to come forward for prayer. Hundreds stood. Amina looked at me. Fear filled her eyes. What if nothing happens? I gently squeezed her hand. What if this is why God brought us here? She slowly nodded. Together we walked toward the front. Every step seemed difficult for her. The years of sickness had stolen almost all her strength. I stayed beside her, praying silently, watching, waiting. The crowd became incredibly quiet. Volunteers moved among the people praying softly. Many wept. Others lifted their hands toward heaven. Then, Amina suddenly collapsed to her knees. My heart nearly stopped. I rushed toward her, thinking she had become worse. But as I reached her, I noticed something extraordinary. She wasn't crying because of pain. She was crying because of overwhelming joy. Her entire face had changed. The fear that had lived in her eyes for years had completely disappeared. Later she told me that in that moment she felt surrounded by an indescribable love. Not condemnation. Not judgment. Love. She said it felt as though Jesus himself was speaking directly to her heart. "My daughter, I have seen every tear. You are not forgotten. Be healed." Suddenly, she stood up. She stretched her arms. She bent forward. She twisted her body from side to side. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Imran. The pain. It's gone." I stared at her, unable to speak. She began walking, faster, then running across the field, laughing, crying, praising God. The same woman who could barely walk only minutes earlier was now running with strength I had not seen in years. People around us began worshiping. Some cried openly. Others praised Jesus with lifted hands. I simply stood there, speechless. watching my wife receive the miracle I had prayed for over countless sleepless nights. That evening we hardly slept. I kept asking her the same questions. Does it hurt now? No. What about your back? No pain. Your legs? They're completely strong. Again and again she smiled through tears. I had forgotten what genuine joy looked like on her face. For nearly 3 years, sickness had stolen her laughter. Now, she couldn't stop smiling. As I watched her that night, something inside me finally broke. The pride I had carried for years. The certainty I thought I possessed. The answers I believed I already had. They all crumbled. For the first time in my life, I admitted something I had never dared to say aloud. Maybe, just maybe, everything I believed needed to be examined honestly. The following morning, while I walked alone near the edge of the gathering, an elderly Christian man approached me. He smiled warmly. "You're from Darwesh Sharif, aren't you?" I stared at him. "Yes." "How do you know?" He replied quietly. "News about the mysterious voice above your mosque has spread throughout the region." My heart skipped a beat. He continued, "Many people have been praying for your town." Then he said something I have never forgotten. Sometimes God allows unusual events. Not to frighten people, but to awaken sleeping hearts. Those words echoed deep inside me. Awaken sleeping hearts. That was exactly what had happened to mine. The mysterious voice. The brilliant light. Amina's dreams. Her miraculous healing. None of it seemed random anymore. It felt like God had been leading us step by step all along. That afternoon, before we began the journey home, someone placed a Bible into my hands. I hesitated. For years, I had criticized a book I had never truly read. Now, for the very first time, I opened it with an honest heart. I didn't realize it then, but the words I was about to read would challenge everything I believed, and the decision I would eventually make would cost me almost everything I owned. Yet it would also lead me to the greatest peace I had ever known. I held the Bible in my hands for a long time before I opened it. The cover felt ordinary, but somehow, I knew the decision to read it was anything but ordinary. For years, I had warned people against reading it. I had criticized its message without ever honestly examining its pages. Now, as our bus carried us home through the dusty countryside, I quietly opened to the Gospel of John. The first words I read were unlike anything I expected. They spoke of light overcoming darkness. Of grace, of truth, of a Savior who came not to condemn the world, but to save it. I kept reading. Every page stirred something deep inside me. Questions I had buried for years suddenly demanded answers. By the time we reached Darwesh Sharif, I was no longer the same man who had left only days earlier. At first, we tried to keep everything private. We simply thanked God for Amina's healing and went about our daily lives. But miracles are difficult to hide. Neighbors who had watched her struggle for years couldn't believe what they were seeing. She carried heavy buckets of water again. She cooked without pain. She laughed with children in the streets. She even began helping elderly women who had once cared for her. People whispered wherever she went. What happened? Which doctor healed her? What medicine did she take? Some smiled with amazement. Others looked at us with suspicion. Every question reminded me that our peaceful little town was about to change forever. Each evening, after everyone had fallen asleep, I lit a small oil lamp. I locked the door, carefully removed the Bible from its hiding place, and read. Hour after hour. Night after night. At first, I searched for mistakes. I wanted to prove it wrong. Instead, the Bible began proving me wrong. The more I read about Jesus, the harder it became to resist him. His compassion overwhelmed me. His forgiveness humbled me. His authority amazed me. I had expected arguments. Instead, I encountered love. I had expected confusion. Instead, I found clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reading to defend my beliefs. I was reading to discover the truth. One evening, I reached the words of Jesus in John 14 verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I read the verse once, then again, then a third time. Suddenly, tears blurred the page. I realized something painful. For years, I had devoted my life to defending traditions. Yet I had never truly searched for the one who claimed to be truth himself. That realization shattered my pride. I closed the Bible and fell to my knees. I couldn't stop crying. Not because I felt condemned, but because I felt loved. Loved by a God who had pursued me even while I resisted him. The following week, everything began to unravel. A respected elder from our mosque arrived unexpectedly at my home. His expression was serious. The council wants to see you. I knew immediately this wasn't a friendly visit. When I entered the meeting room beside the mosque, nearly every respected religious leader in our district was present. The atmosphere was tense. One elder spoke first. Imran. We've heard disturbing reports. I remained silent. You attended a Christian gathering. Yes. Your wife claims she was healed. Yes. He leaned closer. And we've heard you've been reading the Bible. The room became completely silent. Every eye fixed on me. My heart pounded. This was the moment I had feared. Another leader spoke sharply. Tell us the truth. Have you abandoned your faith? For several seconds, I couldn't answer. I thought about my family, my reputation, everything I stood to lose. Then I quietly replied, I am searching for the truth. The room erupted. One man slammed his fist onto the table. Another stood up angrily. You already have the truth. Stop asking dangerous questions. You are bringing shame upon this community. The accusations continued for nearly an hour. Some pleaded with me. Others threatened me. Finally, one elderly leader looked directly into my eyes. If you continue down this road, you will lose everything. His words echoed in my heart long after I left the meeting. Within days, his warning became reality. Friends stopped visiting. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Merchants who once greeted me warmly barely acknowledged my presence. Some parents no longer allowed their children near our home. Rumors spread rapidly. Imran has betrayed us. He has become a follower of Jesus. Stay away from his family. Each rumor hurt, not because they were speaking against me, but because many of those people had once been my closest friends. Several nights I sat outside our house wondering if I should simply give up. Maybe life would become easier if I stopped asking questions. Maybe I should burn the Bible. Pretend none of this had happened. Return to the life everyone expected. But every time those thoughts came, I remembered Amina running across that field. I remembered the mysterious light above the mosque. I remembered the peace that flooded my heart each time I read the words of Jesus. I could ignore many things, but I could no longer deny what God had done. One evening, Amina quietly joined me outside. She could tell something was troubling me. Without saying anything, she simply held my hand. After several minutes she asked, Are you thinking about giving up? I looked down. Sometimes. She smiled gently. Do you remember the night I couldn't even walk to our front door? I nodded. Do you remember the tears? I remember. Do you remember how Jesus healed me? Again, I nodded. She squeezed my hand. Then don't let fear steal what God has already revealed. Her words filled my heart with fresh courage. Sometimes God speaks most powerfully through the people who know us best. A few nights later, just after sunset, someone knocked softly on our door. I opened it. A man stood outside looking over his shoulder nervously. "May I come in?" I recognized him immediately. He was one of the respected businessmen from our town. After he entered, he whispered, "I went to the crusade too." My eyes widened. Before I could respond, another knock came. Then another. Within 30 minutes, 9 men sat quietly inside my small living room. Every one of them had attended the crusade. Every one of them carried questions. One elderly farmer began weeping. "I've dreamed of a man dressed in white for months." Another admitted, "I've secretly been reading the New Testament." Another whispered, "I saw the light above the mosque. I can't explain it. I can't forget it." As I listened, something incredible became clear. God hadn't only been working in my heart. He had been preparing many hearts all across our town. At the same time, from that evening forward, we began gathering secretly every week. No signs, no announcements, only quiet invitations. We prayed together, read scripture together, shared our questions honestly. Slowly, fear gave way to faith. Several men accepted Jesus quietly in those meetings. Others continued searching. Everyone sensed that God was doing something far greater than any of us understood. But secrets rarely stay hidden forever. One afternoon, a young boy delivered another message to my home. The words were short, but chilling. "If these meetings continue, there will be consequences." That night, I knelt beside my bed. For the first time in my life, I prayed directly to Jesus. "Lord, I've spent years resisting you. I've defended what I never truly examined. I've been proud. I've been blind. But now I know. You have been calling me all along, whatever it costs. I surrender my life to you." As I finished praying, a peace unlike anything I had ever experienced filled my heart. The fear disappeared. The uncertainty vanished. For the first time in my life, I knew I belonged to Christ. I had finally found the truth I had spent my entire life searching for. But my public decision to follow Jesus was about to ignite something that would spread throughout our entire region. And the greatest miracle wasn't going to be my wife's healing. It was going to be the transformation of dozens of hearts, including my own.